Welcome to the Informed Advocate Podcast, and I'm your host, Sharon. This podcast is the intersection of self care, advocacy, and compassion among self caregivers. And so, on this episode, we're going to talk about healing. And more so, we're going to talk about the work and effort it takes to heal. One thing that I have come to realize, to recognize, I've been in this field for a long time and I love it, but I've come to realize that we're sending some subliminal messages to people. Not intentional, but we are. And, there's a lot of stigma when it comes to mental health, especially mental illness. And with that message that we're unintentionally telling people, because we're telling people, go get help, go to therapy, go and talk to someone, I've come to realize that part of the messaging is that you're not okay unless you get therapy. And that's not true. It is not true. One thing about Informed Advocate podcast is that we are here to look at every aspect of things and to debunk a lot of things. And as I have said before in a previous episode or two, is that therapy helps a lot of people, but it also doesn't help a lot of people. And the same thing with medical procedures. A certain medical procedure may help a lot of people, but there are some that it doesn't help. But one thing when it comes to healing, and I always say we all have something that we need healing from and we don't even know it. And that goes back to those early childhood experiences that are in the driver's seat. And until we come face to face with them, and most of the time we don't even know, I'm discovering some myself. And for some individuals, they may be where maybe some unhealthy thought patterns and behaviors, and then where others, it could be some limited beliefs and keeping us stuck. And for myself, that's one thing that I've come to realize is that there's certain, I was like, I don't have the thought process, but I can definitely see in my behaviors where I guess you say I will play it safe. However, when we're talking about healing, I would say self-care is before, during, and after therapy. And so whatever you decide what's best for you, you get to decide that. That's the piece about being an informed person, whether it's for yourself or you're helping a loved one, whether it's a family or friend. And so in saying that, it takes work to heal. And because it's not such a feel good thing, and especially when people had experienced abuse, had experienced sexual trauma, had experienced physical abuse, domestic violence, war. And I'm specifically saying those things because of the fact when it comes to the word trauma, there's some different working definitions of that. And we addressed those in a previous episode. So definitely go to the previous episode to where I talked about stress and trauma. Again, when it comes to healing, it takes work. And that's the main thing I really want people to recognize, to acknowledge, and to know it takes work. The way that our mind, body, spirit, the way that it is built, it's built so beautifully until it protects ourselves from ourselves. And so in saying that, meaning that it tries its best not to have us have experienced any pain, know of any pain. The only thing with that is when we're avoiding anything, it gets stuck. And don't get me wrong, at times we need that, especially when we were younger. We didn't have the words to process what we were thinking. If we even had a thought, most of it was just a reaction, from it can be something very innocent. And so, again, when it comes to healing, healing takes work, healing takes effort. It's not just the time. The other thing is that I've come to realize that we hadn't been completely open of the challenges that come along with it, and then it's not pretty. It doesn't feel good. And again, go back and listen to the previous episode when I talked about stress and trauma, because I talked about, stress being like fender benders and accidents, and then with trauma. But the main thing is what it does to the body. Because again, as you will hear more and more episodes, then you will definitely say, okay, I get it. I see. Because once I added that to my own understanding, especially having the words to describe what I was seeing in providing therapy, as well as within myself, like, oh, that's what it is. Meaning that, when we're trying to avoid something, again, we get stuck. And so there's work that has to be done. I'll kind of say, there's no way around it. Now, this is where therapy can come into play, because some people definitely need that guidance, that safe space, the atmosphere of that in order to do it. And again, you get to decide what is best for you, because at the same time, therapy can be very helpful for some and then not so helpful for others. And so when it comes to healing, part of this is to reprogram, to reframe, to rewrite something that had occurred, even the horrible things that have come that's associated with the trauma. I say trauma with the T, meaning the abuse, sexual abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence, physical abuse, being exposed to war, being exposed to an unhealthy environment, witnessing something, or being the victim of something. So we'll say the big T trauma, and then the little t trauma is pretty much what happens to your body. Your body is reacting to an experience. And so in saying all of that, it takes work. And I want you to know that healing doesn't have to start when you go to therapy, because I know that sometimes, especially as caregivers, is that sometimes you put your own health and even mental health needs on hold while you're taking care of others. Sometimes it may just happen to be that way, but other times you choose that because you want to make sure that your loved one is taken care of. And then getting help can be complicated too. And so that can be a delay in services when it comes to, insurance, when it comes to availability of appointments. I talked about that in a previous episode as well. And so, meaning there are really so many reasons, especially in this complex multi-level system. But I'm here to tell you there's hope, and there are things that you can help, especially when it comes to limited beliefs. And if you feel like that you're stuck. Now, there are some other aspects that definitely needs to be addressed in therapy. But as soon as I say that too, I've seen people where it can go either way, where sometimes it can be helpful and sometimes not. And so that is a personal decision that you will need to make. But just know there are some things that you can do. And I'm talking more so of what stress and trauma does to the body. And so having different tools, in order to do that. And so, and the main purpose of this is to build your mental wealth, is to pour into it when you're having experiences. Because in order to have a fully lived life, is to have healthy tools and a healthy mindset to be able to move the way we need to. And so, in a previous episode, we talked about the 555 stress busters. I'm not going to go through them specifically as I've done before, but just want to let you know that this is something that you can pull in your toolbox. Again, this is the 555 stress busters from Sharon. And so remember, it's 5 steps, 5 minutes, 5 days. It's deep breathing, move with intention, take notice, be present, and be you, be your authentic self. And even I've come to realize, oh my, I'm not always myself. Then we can have different parts of ourselves in certain situations around different people. So that's something that I'm working on myself, is to make sure that I show up as me. And so the other thing that can be very helpful is Resama Minikin had written the book My Grandmother's Hands, and that is like one of the best book I have ever read. And one thing that I would say, that even though it is focused on racial trauma, and it gives so many good, it's not just tips, but exercises, practices that you can do to help you move through different traumatic experiences. And I would say it's beyond just racial trauma. These are just practices you can do. And so he wrote an article in Psychology Today, and it was a question. He posed a question: are you bypassing or overriding your body's genius? And so in saying that, he pretty much given tips, I would say, and practices of how we can work through when we're having when we're triggered. I put it like that, when we're triggered. The one thing that I do like about this article, and I didn't think about it until he said it, he definitely distinguished between settling and calming. And pretty much he says settling is a form of presence that supports discernment, healing, and growth. And where common, sometimes we can disassociate. And so again, when it comes to stress and that trauma, the little T, settling, having a practice to settle is really beneficial. And so the 555 stress busters is a good way to settle. The other thing that he says too is becoming present to one's own pain and discomfort. And again, kind of going into, because otherwise we disassociate. And, that is kind of like how smart the body is. It's kind of like fire, fire, fire. What's going on? Stop, stop, stop. Okay, I need to protect. And this is where that fight, flight, freeze comes in, but it gets kind of like on autopilot. The restart button and doesn't know how to shut off. And so we truly have to override our own nervous system to reprogram it, to reframe our thinking, and to rewrite the stories. Because the other thing is that as we're doing our own healing is that we come to look at things in a different way. So you have permission to rewrite it differently because you may see the experience and may even the see the person in a different way of what happened to them as well. And so in one of the body practices, he talked about tempering, conditioning, and discerning. And pretty much with this, he talks about, think about something that's slightly uncomfortable whenever you encounter it. And it can be anything. And to pretty much close your eyes, imagine the source of that discomfort and just to feel away and just imagine that you're looking at it. And as you're looking at it, to notice everything about it. Don't try to, it's pretty much sit with it. And that's the thing when it comes to healing. A lot of times, no one wants to sit with it. And it's hard for people who's supporting someone to sit with it too. And this is why I'm a big advocate for self-care, so that when we're helping ourselves, we're helping others, and when we're helping others, we're helping ourselves as well. And so the other body practice is to stay with discomfort again, because anything that we avoid, that we're paying attention to, it persists, it gets worse, and then it gets stuck in the body. And remember that when it comes to emotions, emotions are energy in motion, and a lot of times they get stuck, and most of the time they really just need a way to just get out. So this is where sometimes where therapy may not always really be needed. Again, for each person, it's really different. But I would definitely say embodiment practices is definitely a need for everyone when it comes down to it. And so definitely I will put the link to that. I will attach the link to that so that you will have. So the other thing is too, Dr. Caroline Leaf. She is a cognitive neuroscientist, and she has been studying the mind and the brain for like 30 years. And I just came about of knowing about her maybe 6 months ago or so, maybe 9 months. I had no idea she even existed. And now that I know who she is, I am like, wow, where has this woman been all of my career life? Because she is definitely talking my language. But anyway, she has written a book called Cleaning Up My Mental Mess. And she has specific techniques. And one thing that she says is that it takes, I believe she said 64 days in order to change a habit. And she dives into, with her podcast and her book, of the work that it takes, to overcome anxiety, depression, and so many other things. And in particularly, on a podcast, and she has written newsletters and things of such, 5 simple and scientific steps to detox trauma and toxic thinking. And not according to her, what she says, and I agree with her, is that anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress are all ways of describing natural human responses to adversity. And I try my best to normalize what someone is experiencing. And so you can do that too, in that I can remember several months ago, I came to a epiphany of what I would call the true meaning of what a nervous breakdown is that, because a lot of times I've looked at something very negative and somebody can't handle, or something's wrong with someone. No, it's the nervous system breaking down. The nervous system isn't made to pretty much have all of that activity going on at one time. And so it's too much. It's not that it's too much for the person, it's too much for the anyone's nervous system, because no one can sustain that over time. So even if someone may appear to, as they're handling it, at some point there would be a breaking point. And so in saying that, when it comes to the five, there are switch on your 5 steps to a learning process. And she has 5 things that she says. She says, gathering awareness, and that is of your physical and emotional warning signals, reflecting on why you are feeling these things in your body and mind, writing down your reflections to organize your thinking, rechecking what you have written and how your thoughts and feelings have changed, and active reach, taking action to reconceptualize your thinking and find sustainable healing. So again, it's all about the work that it takes to heal. And I'm using the word work, but it's more so the effort. I would use that word instead. It takes effort to heal, and it's part of the process, and we cannot bypass it, because anything that we bypass, meaning that one, we haven't learned the lesson, or there may be gifts within us, that may be hidden because of all of the debris that's in that life kind of puts on us. So this is another reason, especially as self-caregivers, if you're a personal self-caregiver or a professional self-caregiver, in that it is so important for all of us to remove the debris, because not until I started doing my own work, I didn't even realize, it's like, oh, okay, we all have little quirks about us. They're protective modes, a lot of them, there's nothing wrong with it. But at the same time, what I've come to realize is that, some of them can keep us stuck and not be our authentic self. So again, when it comes to healing, there's effort that comes with it. It may not always be a pretty thing to go through. It can be very challenging. And remember, it's almost like peeling an onion away, because there's different layers of it. And there's just so many deep stuff that's inside us. Again, it's kind of like it hides ourselves from ourselves. And so that can be pretty cool initially, because it may be needed. So as adults, we're responsible and accountable for our own healing, and find not just the resources is to apply, to implement with whatever it is. And again, for some individuals, therapy is needed to help guide you to be gentle. And for others, because I'm like, a lot of things are very therapeutic, And so again, it takes effort, and give yourself grace and be gentle with yourself. Some things really take some time, and just approach things a little at a time. When it comes down to it, it's not always about having these aha moments and insights. That's true too, but it's also about releasing, not being stuck, releasing the energy that may be holding us back. And again, this is what Informed Advocate Podcast is all about. It's exploring and seeing what's out there so that you can make, informed decisions about your care, your health, your life. And if you're a caregiver, of someone else, of supporting someone, even for them themselves, depends. Um, they are accountable for their, own life, for their livelihood, as well. And so this is something that will help everyone. So it takes work, should I say effort, to heal. And I commend you on that. Be gentle with yourself. And all of it is to reprogram your mind, to reframe what happened, to rewrite the story so that you can, feel your mental wealth with better stories and better aspects of yourself. So again, know that when it comes to healing, there's work to be done, and you got it. So thank you for listening to this episode of the Informed Advocate Podcast.